pleasure seeing you guys. I know we had a chat outside before we started, so we're well acquainted. I hope you guys feel all right. I mean, the climate issue is obviously an important one. One of the most important of our time, frankly. Many people think it is an existential crisis. Some, not so much. There's quite a bit of climate skepticism these days. I do want to start by just mentioning there have been numerous climate conferences over the past month. Right now, there's the Global Plastics Treaty that's happening in Bhutan, South Korea. Just before that, last week, was the COP29 climate conference that took place in Baku, Azerbaijan, which the minister just mentioned. Just at the end of October, there was the COP16 Biodiversity Summit. My first question, are there too many climate conferences? Anyone can take this one. Are there too many? Go for it, Christopher.
Well, I wouldn't want to presume to have all the answers and go first, but I work primarily in multilateral engagement in the environmental defense.
Might want to go a bit closer to your mic.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better? Sorry, I'm short, so I hate to lead up. So I work primarily in multilateral engagement in the Environmental Defense Fund, and we engage in all of these key conferences, the multilateral negotiations around the CBD COP, COP16, which you mentioned was in Colombia, the UNFCCC COP, which was in Baku a week or so ago, and then the upcoming COP16 on the combating desertification, so another COP. This is the year of the COP trio, the Rio trio as we call it. And so the question is, are there too many COPs? Are there too many climate conventions? Are there too many climate meetings? I don't think that's necessarily the case, because at one point in the 90s, the world got together and thought that we needed to have these conventions, these treaties, these international agreements dealing with very specific issues of the environment. The question really is not, do we have too many meetings? Are we doing enough synergies? One of the big outcomes of these COPs this year, especially COP16 in Cali, was to promote the synergies process, to make sure that the national implementation of each of these conventions is actually happening in an efficient, synergistic, meaningful way, that the policies that are being put forward around biodiversity, around climate change, around combating desertification, are integrated and not happening in silos. So I think that's really the better way of thinking about it, Reagan, because these are international agreements that need to be implemented in an integrated way to make sure that each aspect of them is actually having an impact at the local and national level.
One of the criticisms out of COP29 and during that conference as well was that there was no synergy. There is no collaboration between the rich and the poor, the wealthy, the developing countries. There was a lot of anger, a lot of frustration out of COP29. It ended with an agreement that half of the planet did not like and thought was pushed through without their consent. One of the questions that was asked at COP29 was, are climate conferences becoming redundant if they no longer serve the entire planet? Can anyone respond to that? Stephen?
So I would say that, as an organization who's at the sharp end of climate change, that there is definitely a disconnect. I mean, we see now today the direct link between climate change and migration, climate change and conflict, and climate change and hunger. So we actually see that today. We see 72 million people being pushed into poverty in 2023, directly linked to climate change. So these are things that we are actually seeing on the ground, and I think that's the disconnect that we see. We see these are the people who have affected climate change in the least way possible, but are feeling the effect more than anybody else. And there needs to be a step up from the world to say that we understand where this is coming from and who it is affecting most. And without that understanding, things are going to get worse, which we just can't accept today.
You brought up climate migration. It will be a big issue in coming decades, with an estimated 1 billion people who will be believed to be forced to move from their homes because of greater, stronger weather, more erratic weather. Bhuwan, you are from India, which just experienced its monsoon season. Every year, hundreds of people die because of these floods and landslides. What do you think the impact of greater, stronger monsoons would have on people in India, and specifically on the topic of climate migration?
Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, so these kind of natural disasters, these are kind of increasing year by year. Obviously, floods are something which is a predominant effect across country in India, especially in the northern part as well as sometimes in the eastern part of India. Uh, Again, climate change, what we have seen is one of the major contributor to these kind of floods and landslides and all this stuff. But if you're not kind of working in the right direction, as you mentioned, the high monsoon, like what could be the reason for that high monsoon or that kind of, non-normal monsoons? Those are the things which kind of, these are directly related with the climate change effects, which are being kind of experienced globally now, not only in India. We have seen recently in Spain as well, a huge flood which has kind of killed more than 300 people. So yeah, these kind of things which we need to see right now from the lens of climate change, I would say. Also in terms of the impact on the desertification, obviously people are kind of forced to shift from their base places to other places. For example, people right now in the northern part of India, which is the more of a mountaineer part, people now are kind of coming down the slope, maybe moving to the different cities in terms of just to avoid those kind of mishaps coming in the next few years. So this is something which we need to think of. I think, yeah, this is what I can see right now from that climate change lens.
And sticking to the topic of climate migration, Turkey has one of the largest populations of refugees on the planet. What do you think a flood of climate refugees will do for Turkey, its economy, its people? What do you think might happen?
Yeah, I think countries like Turkey, they need to achieve transition to low carbon economy. This is the way to solve these challenges, meet these challenges, because Turkey is dependent on fossil fuel imports from other countries, and it needs to reduce the amount of these fossil fuels and increase the share of renewable energy. Plus clean energy. In that sense, nuclear energy is quite important for Turkey because in order to facilitate increase in renewable energy, wind, solar, and others, you need to provide base electricity for these facilities that could be provided either by coal-powered plants or by nuclear plant. This is the reason why Turkey started its first plant, which will be operational next year. I mean, at least the first part of the project will be completed. This will increase Turkey's capacity to generate more renewable energy. Countries like Turkey has advantage in increasing the renewable energy in terms of the...
Oksana, let me just ask you to pull your mic a bit closer to you as well. Pull your mic a bit closer to you.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Yeah. Sunlight, in terms of sunlight, in terms of capacity for wind, I think, and also geothermal energy, Turkey's potential is great. It has been developing this capacity, but it takes time. And also, Turkey is learning from this experience, aligning its strategy with the EU. Turkey is a member of Customs Union, so European Green Deal is quite important for Turkey. In that sense, Turkey's success in aligning its energy strategy with the broader Green Deal framework enables Turkey to export this experience to neighboring countries in the Caucasus, in Central Asia, Middle East, and North Africa. By achieving this transition to low-carbon economy, Turkey is also developing its technology. The private sector, joint ventures with international investors, they all increased Turkey's capacity to generate more renewable energy. I think compared to, let's say, early 2000s, Turkey is in a better position now to deal with these challenges, but there is a long way to go. It's a process.
All right. Thank you for that. Just a reminder, this topic is transforming tomorrow, the power of eco-regeneration. Let's talk about regeneration, eco-regeneration. Resilience is obviously quite important when it comes to how we withstand climate disasters and recover from them. Buwan, how do you think eco-regeneration principles can be applied to enhance community resilience?
Yeah, I think, see, if you understand the word eco-regeneration, it basically prominently depends on the biodiversity. That is the major pillar of, any kind of eco-regeneration. When I talk about biodiversity, it contributes or it contains all the elements, right? Whether it is your forest or your soil, your, which kind of power you're using in your communities. So the first one is definitely, in terms of restoring the ecosystem is the first priority, I would say, in terms of the principle for eco-generation. Second thing I would say, it's, more dependent on the communities. You have to be very cohesive in terms of communities. When you talk about conserving our biodiversity, right, you need people support. So any kind of project or any kind of initiative is not possible unless until the local communities are involved. So we need to involve the local communities more and more in the decision making. That is the most important part of any kind of initiative which can save planet or avoid climate change. Third thing is, I would say, economic resilience. Again, we talk about community, we talk about forest and soil, but, unless until there are economics or there's the capital is involved, these projects or these efforts are not possible. So at the same time, the local community should also get back from their efforts, which they are putting in terms of these kind of projects. So yeah, their well-being is important, their economical development is important, upliftment of their lifestyle, livelihood is important. That is again part. Fourth part is obviously the climate resilience. People need to understand how this climate is impacting them, right? You gave a very good example of the floods, right? These floods were not very common maybe 20, 25 years back, even in India or in other parts of the world. What has kind of resulted in terms of increasing numbers of these kind of floods? Obviously, cutting of trees, bad management of the overall soil and as well as the forests around those places. So people need to understand how does this small things affect them in a larger way. So that is again one of the very important parts to bring in that climate awareness within the communities. And the final part I would say, health and well-being, which absolutely comes along with these efforts. If you are kind of driving all the top four things together, definitely the health and the well-being of these communities will improve. So all these principles have to work together to kind of make that mechanism to work automatically.
Climate finance was a huge topic this year. The carbon market as a system, a new financial system that allows countries to buy and sell, I guess, the carbons that they do not emit. When you talk about defending biodiversity, do you think, is India welcoming the carbon market to help it not emit so much, or appear as though it's not emitting so much carbon?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of when you talk about the carbon markets globally, one very good thing happened in COP29 was the approval of Article 6, right, which was pending for almost 9 years, or almost a decade. So what this article basically enables countries to do is to, to develop projects for their own NDCs in other parts of the world as well as within the country, right? And if you talk about India, yes, we are definitely looking at it as a very strong point in terms of achieving our committed numbers in terms of reduction of the emissions. That is the reason, you might have heard that India is also coming up with its own ETS, which is the emission trading scheme within India. That would actually, kind of bound businesses, which are the higher emitting businesses, to achieve a certain level of emission reduction in their yearly emissions, and if they are not able to do that, then they have to buy those carbon credits from the companies who are having the negative emissions. So in this way up, India is definitely looking forward a lot, and this Article 6 is a welcoming, approval of Article 6 is a welcoming step for India's overall ambition in terms of reducing carbon.
All right, so obviously policy is quite important if the carbon market system is to
Absolutely.
work. Christopher, you work at the Environmental Defense Fund. Effective policy is obviously crucial for environmental progress. What specific policy frameworks or reforms does your organization prioritize to advance eco-regeneration?
Well, something that EDF is working on a lot right now has to do with methane abatement. Methane is a really potent greenhouse gas. It's actually 80 times more powerful than CO2 when it comes to trapping heat in the atmosphere. And we've identified some quick wins when it comes to actually preventing methane from leaking out of oil and gas operations and from farms and ranches, dairy farms, for example, where lots of methane is often emitted. So something that we've been pushing now through the COP28 presidency, so the UAE, the last COP presidency in the climate process, and also with over 50 national oil companies, is the Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter, working with these companies to kind of seize on these quick wins of preventing the leakage of methane, to kind of prevent some of those more harmful greenhouse gases from seeping into the atmosphere, and also then supporting them in terms of policies and finance to make sure that they're able to actually go about and do that. In addition, EDF recently, this year actually, launched what's called the Methane Sat, which is a satellite now in space that is able to kind of measure and collect data on actual methane leaks and emissions from different parts of the world. So we see this as really a really quick way of kind of preventing some of the worst impacts of methane emissions, while also allowing countries to kind of act quickly on dealing with some of their mitigation issues from their energy sector.
Is carbon capture technology under consideration in your, how do you approach this topic? It's a bit controversial. What is your organization's thoughts on it as it pertains to, I guess, controlling methane emissions?
Well, carbon capture technology certainly is quite controversial. I mean, there are a lot of organizations out there that do quite a lot on it. Our organization does not do too much on that. There are those who really see it as almost like a panacea, a way of dealing with some of the worst impacts of our carbon emissions, allowing kind of an expansion of oil and gas and fossil fuel, pulling the fossil fuels out of the ground and then also making sure to kind of capture some of that. But EDF itself doesn't necessarily do too much on that. We prefer to see how we can transform economies, kind of do the quick wins around the methane abatement, but also start the transitions towards a more clean, fuel-efficient economies, using clean energy to kind of power our lives and livelihoods, and not necessarily focus on things like that. So
Interesting.
yeah, the controversy of it is still quite palpable, I think, in our sector.
Stephen, as part of the UN, you have access, I think, to information and statistics that the regular person does not have access to. You know a lot more about what we face. What do you think is the single threat that climate change poses to the regular person?
I wouldn't say I'd answer for the regular person. I'd say we answer for the poorest people in the world, those people who are most in need, who are most affected by this. So we're very concerned about what's going to happen with global food prices. If food prices go up, it means that people need more money to buy the same food. It means that we need, as an organization which feeds 123 million people a year, we need more money to feed the same people, very simply put. So we're very concerned about, global food prices and how we stabilize them, right? At the same time, recognizing that farmers need to earn a living as well. So how do you get that balance between both those sides? And that's some of the work that we do in Turkey as well. We buy more from Turkey than any other country in the world to feed places like Gaza, Yemen, Sudan, South Sudan, and Syria. And we can only do that because there is an efficient system here. But we really want to see, we're spending over the last 2 years almost $500 million on Turkish food going around the world. It's instrumental to what we're going to do. If there's an impact on that, the impact on the people we feed would be devastating, literally devastating. So we have an extremely strong motivation to make sure that climate change is minimized, because if it is not, the work that we do, which we're trying to minimize, is going to grow astronomically.
I'm glad you brought Gaza up. We are seeing atrocity at levels many of us have never seen ever in our lifetime, not only because of the massive numbers of people that die there on a daily basis, but we also see the earth, the soil, the biodiversity just being lost from these bombs. The asbestos alone, it is poisoning the soil to an extent that we are still yet to comprehend. What type of eco-regeneration systems or practices can be applied to protect and, I guess, rejuvenate the soil there when the war ends in Gaza?
So I think it's a great question that when it ends, and it will end one day, of course. But today, you know, again, we go back to we're moving so much food from Turkey into Gaza at the moment. It's instrumental for what we're doing, and we need to keep that moving. That cannot be interrupted in any way, because the effects on people who are literally weeks away from starvation will be catastrophic. But the next day, the day after, as we call it as well, but we see it in Syria today, which we couldn't have imagined 10 years ago. We're doing irrigation now plans in Syria. We're doing irrigation plans across the Sahel. We've rehabilitated 370,000 hectares of land across. And the great thing about that is not just rehabilitation, it means that people can feed themselves. It means that farmers can go to market. It means that localization, local food production for local people actually matters, and WFP steps away. So there are signs, but first and foremost in Gaza, we need peace.
Farmers, you mentioned farmers, they're obviously a bedrock in every society. Without them, there's no food. I'm supposing, or guessing rather, the UN has systems in place to support farmers who need assistance more than anyone else, I guess.
Completely. And the irony is that those farmers who are producing so much food are some of the poorest people in the world. They're the ones who are most at risk of climate change. Bad rains, irregular rains, droughts. We see now, you know, an added number of monsoons or irregular monsoon seasons in the Indian subcontinent. In Bangladesh, we did a forward cash advance to people to allow them to prepare for those type of emergencies. So we do have mechanisms. We're also working with, for example, climate risk insurance, which we provide to about 5 million people across the globe, which means that in case for farmers that there is a low rains, the insurance market can step in. And this is my really main point, is that this needs the private sector. And I was just talking with Buwan before, and we didn't think we had anything in common, yet we saw that work in Malawi that they're doing on stoves for the same people that we're supporting stops deforestation, which allows people then to work better, reduces climate risk, all of those things. And that's only if the private sector and the humanitarian sector work much closer together.
Oktay, you mentioned Turkey as a leader many countries can learn from. I've seen the Karapanar solar power plant. It is impressive. Kilometers upon kilometers of solar power panels that supplies energy to many people in Konya. When it comes to the farmers, though, what can the world learn from the way Turkey supports local farmers?
I think the new technologies are quite important in terms of irrigation systems, and I think the satellite technology and the use of new technologies would contribute to this more eco-regeneration strategies. But Turkey has been reforming the agricultural strategy to fit the needs of environment-friendly transition.
We just have a few minutes left. I do want to talk a bit about the plastics, the Global Plastics Treaty that's happening right now. The problem of plastic waste is not quite often talked about in the media or ever really. We talk a bit about it on TRT World on our climate series, Just 2 Degrees, but it is a huge problem. What do you think is at the core of this battle between whether or not we should recycle versus we should stop producing plastics? Anyone? Which would you choose? Stop producing plastics or create more systems that allow us to recycle a lot more and a lot faster?
I can take that.
Go for it.
Obviously, stopping plastic won't be a solution, a permanent solution, I would say, because what is happening, see, if you look at the history of plastic, what it has brought to the world and to the people is, the number one is, in terms of ease of availability of the stuff which you want to use. Second is slight reduction in the cost, vis-a-vis if you're talking about metals or, ores which are coming out of the earth's surface. But yes, as the use of plastic increased, the pollution also increased, the plastic waste pollution I'm talking about. And recycling is the only way, I would say, in the immediate future, which can provide a solution to this problem. Stopping plastic overnight won't be a practical solution, I would say, though it can be a possible solution in a longer run, but not in the immediate future. But yes, recycling is something which you can start as soon as today, right? And people are doing that. And for the same thing, to incentivize those kind of initiatives, there are plastic credits available, right, through certain registries who are providing plastic credits to the corporates who can offset their plastic usage. But yes, overall, this is a serious concern, I would say, globally. I have been watching a lot of videos and posts in terms of how much plastic is impacting the oceans in the larger way. Oceans, again, that comes back to the biodiversity part. If you are polluting oceans, you are polluting a large part of the earth. Definitely we should stop this, and recycling, I see, is the front and foremost solution for this right now.
Before we go, just to raise your hands, anyone agrees that we should stop producing plastics? Raise of hands. Wow, 2. So who, 3, okay, 5, 6. Who prefers that we just create more technology to recycle more? All right, got it. Thank you so much. We'll wrap this up now. We've just 6 seconds left. All right, so Bhuwan Shukla, Christopher Decky, Oktay, Tana Sever, Stephen Cahill, thank you so much for your time. Round of applause for them, please. We appreciate your contribution here on TRT World Forum. Don't go anywhere. Coming up right now, my colleague Ali Jean Ayanla has his own panel. We will not have a coffee break because we are behind time. Ali Jean will have a very dynamic conversation right now. Ali Jean, where are you? He's coming up right now. So just say where you are. Thank you so much. You guys.